Glenn returned the next morning. There he was, eyes down on his laptop, for all the world as though nothing had happened. I must confess that I was hit with a wave of relief. He was alive and well and back where he belonged. But his behaviour of yesterday needed answering for, and although my anger had subsided to a degree, it was clear to me now that a face-to-face meeting was imperative. How our rendezvous would play out was beyond my powers of prediction. Either love or my still simmering pangs of aggrievement would determine the outcome. I maintained a constant watch on Glenn's flat. Every time he left the rooms that I could see, I transferred my attention to the exits from his buildings, ready to jump into action. I had a bag of shopping preloaded with groceries and a celebratory bottle of Prosecco by my door, so that it would appear as though I was returning from shopping when we seemingly met by accident. A small hunting knife nestled invisibly in the back pocket of my jeans, just in case. After a few false alarms, presumably for trips to the bathroom, around 5 p.m, it happened. Glenn left his living room and emerged a short while later from his block into the cobbled courtyard. He was wearing light blue trousers that matched his shirt a little too obviously, a navy sweater and what seemed to be brogues on his feet. I almost laughed at the adorable predictability of his dress sense. But then I realised I hadn't yet forgiven him for his unexplained disappearing act the day before. Glenn made his way across the courtyard to the pedestrian gate, and he came in my direction. As he did, I realised with a thrill that I'd never yet seen him so up close before. He was as trim and handsome as ever, and possibly even taller than I had assumed. His haircut was a regulation short back and sides, but it suited him. His dark hair styled with precision to form a perfect crown upon his head. He walked with an air of confidence, serious and sure of himself. Was there a taint of arrogance in his demeanour, though? A certainty that he was entitled to go about his business as he pleased, and nobody had the authority to come between him and whatever it was that he wanted. Was he full of himself, in need of cutting down to size, or simply self-assured? I would find out for myself very soon. Pushing through the pedestrian gate, Glenn turned right and strode east along the tree-lined street. That was my cue. Flinging down my ×3 binoculars, I sprinted out of my flat, scooping up my bag of shopping along the way, and hurtled down the 3 flights of grimy stairs. I nearly lost my footing at one point, but regained my balance and pressed on through the exterior door and out into the passageway that led onto the street. Glenn wasn't immediately in sight, which meant that he must have taken a left into the short lane that connected with the high street. I positioned myself on the corner of that lane, from where I could observe all the routes back into Glenn's flat. And there I waited, and I watched. When people occasionally passed my way, I pretended to be engaged with my phone, and made sure to allow them the allotted space. I considered walking around for a bit to avert any suspicion of loitering, but I couldn't risk losing sight of Glenn's return paths. I filled the time trying to figure out what I was going to do when Glenn and I were finally toe-to-toe, and imagining a multitude of different outcomes to the encounter. These ranged from his coy invitation to come up to his flat for tea, to my furious but effective tirade about his whereabouts the night before. But whether in these visions I was tearing strips off him, or I was soothing our troubled waters, the question of our future was always settled one way or another. Each scenario rang as true as the last, and as time wore on, I grew no clearer about what I would end up doing. Would my actions be led by abhorrence or by adoration? I was conscious of the knife in my back pocket, but also I could almost hear the popping of Prosecco corks, and maybe fireworks too. Then, after almost an hour of waiting and wondering, I saw him turn the corner onto our road with a bag of shopping in each hand. This was it. My heart suddenly racing, I set out on a path that would bring me back to the estate at the same time as Glenn. My knees trembled, threatening to buckle beneath me, and sweat began to seep out of what felt like every pore in my body. A voice in my head whispered insidiously, urging me to stop before it was too late, questioning all that I knew and everything that I wanted. No, I would not be dissuaded. Whatever the conclusion, this encounter was going to happen, and it was going to happen now. Glenn reached the gate and set down the bag of shopping in his right hand, fishing in his pocket for his entry fob. I made sure to keep a respectful distance from him, more than the official span, but by far the closest that we'd ever been to each other. He went through the motions of opening the gate, entirely oblivious that something momentous was about to engulf us, his lips slightly parted, his expression neutral. The lock clicked as he touched his fob to it, and he began to push his way through the gate. I called out to him, "Glenn." He continued as though he hadn't heard me. Perhaps in my nervousness I had swallowed my voice. "Glenn." He turned around, and our eyes met for the first time since that memorable moment across the 50-odd yards that separated our homes. A shared experience that had led us both here. His face was difficult for me to read at first. A slight frown which might have been confusion, but could just as easily have been a precursor to recognition. "It's me." His frown faded and a new expression settled on that handsome face of his. But was it the soft glow of affection? Or was it a harder, more provocative reaction? Was it love? Or was it rejection? At last it was time for the truth. And so I closed the distance between us